Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
I'm Uncle Dan.
I'm Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
That's right. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear. That's why we're here.
We are your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
We're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get one that we know of, so you'd better make the most of it.
Giddy up. Well, uncles of the other two of you.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, that's who we are.
Episode 71, hot and fresh.
Ooh.
It's going to be amazing.
Straight out the oven.
Yeah, straight out the oven. So I'm just going to get this out of the way. My segment is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's pretty fucking terrible.
we're putting it first, and hopefully we'll forget about it by the end of the show.
I'm going to have a palate cleanser mostly made of salt water.
Yes, indeed. And I am going to, I don't know. I just hope whatever I do, you'll accept me.
Well, it's probably a little late for that. So with that, and then a little later in the show, we'll announce another little thing. We have some
We're going
good
to announce how much money we are donating to the FFRF from your generosity. So,
Yep. So we'll get to that. Until then, let's cry a little.
Yeehaw! Hey, Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
I don't know if you've ever stayed in a hotel in your own city. Have you ever done
I
that?
actually have done that once.
I've done that a couple times.
One, it was a broken water line one time I had to stay in a hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our city is replete with fine places to stay.
Sure, and not so fine.
And shitty, awful places to stay.
Yeah.
And some of them have stories about them. Mark, Uncle Mark,
This is the first of the How To Heretics hotel reviews.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, when you come to Salt Lake. So we'll cover that. Actually,
they've changed the name of this hotel to trick us.
Oh, yeah.
they have changed the name, and I'll tell you in a minute. You'll know what the the original name of the hotel was, which is kind of hilarious. Which is good because we need a little hilarity in this particular segment. So,
Yeah.
you know, as you guys know, the past couple episodes, I've kind of let myself get carried away and have some fun.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had the Lord of the Universe and his flying Astrodome, and space politician Xenu, who might have shot it out of the sky had he flown by it in his interstellar DC-8 at the time. Lots of laughs, lots of yucks.
I've been concerned. You've been keeping things light.
I got giddy.
You seemed kind of healthy these past few weeks.
Yeah, we need to bring that down.
And I forgot what the content of our show really is. So, well, that's not really going to be the case today, friends, the giddiness. And that's because when you run a little podcast that examines the wild and woolly world of religion and its excesses every week, they ain't always going to be sunny days.
No.
And today's topic is a very, very rainy day indeed. Many Utahns may know a little bit about this event. It's a local story and a for-real trigger warning. This culminates in a super tragic event that involves children. So I won't mention the event until the very end, and I'll give another little warning for anybody that wants to eject.
Also, isn't that trigger warning applicable to all religions?
It is, but this is a very specific incident. Sure.
Also, the phrase "anyone who wants to eject" seems particularly callous in this case.
Oh, thoughtless Mark. So, oddly, for the infamy of the events surrounding today's subject, and that it was relatively recent, there's not a ton written about it.
Huh.
So I'm relying on a lot of old newspaper articles and scraps of info that are not in full agreement about some of the facts.
Okay.
Like some of the details, but I think we may be off a tiny bit on a detail or two, but not the larger story and the actual event. So today we're going to meet a very tiny cult that calls themselves the Family of David.
Uh-oh, he used present tense.
Yeah.
Oh.
And yeah, unfortunately. And an event that basically cut their numbers in half.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It all begins with a guy named Charles Bruce Longo, who was born into a wealthy doctor's family in beautiful Westchester County, New York in 1938. And though the family attended an Episcopal church fairly regularly, no one in the family described themselves as particularly religious. Longo was apparently a gifted kid, graduated from high school, then joined the Marines in 1956. And it was in the service that he met some Mormon guys he was impressed with and picked up the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, not even once. So, Longo converted to Mormonism in 1958. He became a Boy Scout. He was a young guy, became a Boy Scout leader and a young men's leader. Then he went on a mission to Uruguay.
In what year?
He probably went around 1959. On a Mormon mission where he impressed his companion, a guy named Skip Danes, who will figure into the story again, because he memorized the Book of Mormon.
Oh my God!
What?
Yeah,
Is that a thing?
something I would consider a cognitively impossible task.
That's like memorizing pi to the billionth degree or whatever.
Sure, but bearing in mind that half of the book is "and it came to pass."
Right, there's certain patterns.
Yeah, we've all memorized a lot of that book just by knowing that phrase.
Yeah, that's a good
true.
third of it right there.
If you know where it comes in, you're in better shape. Here's what's interesting. My dad served a mission in Uruguay in the 50s.
So I wonder if they crossed paths.
I wonder if they did.
It's it's in the 50s especially. It was a pretty sparsely populated country. So
Yeah.
they may have crossed paths. So anyway, he also impressed his companion by picking up Spanish very quickly. So everything was going well, except Longo got sent home early for health reasons.
When you've got the entire Book of Mormon memorized, that can't be good for your health.
No, it's bad for your spleen. He contracted hepatitis, but more germane to today's discussion, he was hearing voices.
Oh no!
So he made his way to Utah and in 1961 enrolled in an institution that I would wager is not the best place for a God-bothered, mentally ill young man to land, Brigham Young University.
Oops.
What I call the Southern Madrasa. BYU, Idaho being the even worse and more northerly madrasa.
Your Uncle Doug spent a year there at old BYU.
Yeah, but not BYU, Idaho. BYU.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is,
You
most
poor
definitely.
bastard.
I survived.
Yeah, a few degrees better than BYU, Idaho. So anyway, as is frequently the case for BYU students, he met his soon-to-be wife, a Swedish immigrant named Margit Eriksson there, and they had 3 children before he graduated in 1965.
Wow.
So he was apparently a very persuasive guy, a fact that his surviving brother, a police chief in Florida, remains completely baffled by. He told several of his close friends at BYU that he had a vision that he was going to become prophet of the Mormon Church. Shortly after that, he wrote 2 letters, one to Mormon HQ here at Temple Square in Salt Lake City. And can you guess the destination of the second letter, Uncle Dan?
The President of the United States.
Eerily close.
The Vatican?
Eerily closer, the Israeli Knesset. So he told the Mormon hierarchy that he had proclaimed himself the legitimate prophet, seer, and revelator of the church, called church president Spencer W. Kimball an evil shepherd, telling them, quote, "Your people are perishing in their ignorance and unbelief, and as Mormons know, even the slightest challenge to leadership will get you crushed."
He also used Book of Mormon language to do that.
Perishing in unbelief.
That's a quote from the Book of Mormon.
So you'll get crushed if you criticize or even come close to criticizing.
That's
church
why we
leadership.
never do that on this show.
Longo's relieving them of their command was met with a swift excommunication.
As you do.
His letter to the Israeli Knesset, their parliament, for anyone who might not know, was a tad more alarming. He said, "I am the father of Jesus Christ that you slew."
Good opener. That's a solid opener.
Strong. Okay, you have my attention, Mr. Longo.
To the secular government of Israel.
Yes. "I am the only one that can deliver you. Without me, you will perish. I am the father of Israel, and the blood of Israel runs through my veins." So, he also claimed the Star of David belongs to him, and by extension, and I'm quoting here, white people.
Wow.
Yeah, the sect claims knowledge of
I own a shape and a race, apparently.
Yes, and my race owns that shape. Take it off your damn flag. So he claimed to have knowledge of lost books of the Bible. A guy named Jacob David, the living reincarnation of Abraham of the Bible, and brother-in-law of the late Mr. Longo, said, quote, "We are the Israelites from the lost tribes of Israel." It is odd that cultists obsessed with the Bible and claiming to be its main characters don't know what an Israelite is. Another word for Jew. But let's not let such trifles derail this crazy train.
Well, let's not forget that they have Mormon roots and therefore are rightfully confused about what
They know what an Israelite
is.
It's an Arapaho Indian.
So, having proclaimed himself God, gotten himself excommunicated from his church, and having threatened an entire nation, he and his still somehow convinced little group moved to the rural backwater of Manti, Utah. Oh. The capital of turkey production in the state for any poultry enthusiasts.
That's right.
I did not know that.
It is, and more importantly, the final home of the late 1960s surf and hot rod cult artist and creator of the iconic Ratfink character, Big Daddy Roth.
Was that English?
That's true.
I don't know what you just said.
He died in Manti.
Yes. And there in Nowheresville of Manti, Utah, Longo set up some kind of commune where he and his 24 followers learned how to make knives, one of which was a 3-foot sword Longo began carrying on the regular, saying he was preparing to chop off thousands of heads. Does that last paragraph seem insanely bizarre, disorienting, and tangential? Welcome to Utah, bitches. The Florida of the Intermountain West.
Oh, we're much more reserved about our crazy.
Well, Manti,
we could use a little Florida.
All we're missing is large reptiles, and we would be exactly like Florida.
Manti is also the home of the now doomed Mormon Manti pageant, where every summer white teenagers get all smeared up in brownface and do a live play about how the evil Jews betrayed Jesus, and so they're tawny-skinned Native Americans forever. So, Manti Tourist Bureau, you know where to send the check to the How to Heretic. So, Manti deep cuts aside. It was around this time Longo took the name he would become known for, Emmanuel David. His followers all began to change their surnames to David while adopting the first names of biblical action heroes they had been reincarnated from.
What is it with guys who, with like savior / God complexes, using the word David? David Koresh wasn't named David. He just took that name.
Well, because David, I guess, among all of the Bible characters, was chosen. Right?
Well, if you don't read the New Testament, you only read the Old Testament, David's a pretty big deal. Like
he's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, he's only kind of pushed out of the limelight by Jesus, who was a descendant.
So
yeah, that's true.
So they're all changing their names, and at this point, Emmanuel David had taken to claiming he was the entire Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And by now topping out at over 300 pounds, he certainly could have been 3 people. He and his followers became well known to the Salt Lake police and Mormon church security because of the multiple incidents where they would show up at Temple Square and try to cause some kind of scene. The papers aren't clear on what that meant, but it happened several times, and I guess no arrests were made. So Emmanuel had another vision in which he was shown he would save the Republic. If you recall just a couple shows back, episode 68, Uncle Doug told us about the Mormon White Horse prophecy, which apparently influenced Emmanuel's sense of self-importance. So in order for him to save what was then Gerald Ford's America from its impending collapse, he dispatched 3 of his most ardent followers, who happened to be karate instructors, to Washington, D.C., and rechristened them as the literal biblical archangels Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel.
Oh,
right. And maybe Donatello and Leonardo.
I was going to say
the Mormon Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, we've talked about this a few times on the show before, but there's this little quirk with the issue of Mormon prophecy, right? It's the Linux of prophetic systems. It's open source. So while they've tried to tamp it down in the modern age, it's still on the books that any worthy male priesthood holder can receive prophecy directly from God. And once in a while, the brain of the mortal on the receiving end can be a little fritzy or highly opportunistic, like our friend Emmanuel David. So his kung fu archangels lingered around D.C. without much purpose. Pretty soon they were broke and homeless, but they didn't lose faith, even as they spent a D.C. winter sleeping on the street.
Oh my God! What were they trying to do?
They were gonna take over the government.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no more information than that. So, after a year of on this standby, they were recalled to Utah. Emmanuel told them he had been given the original golden plates from which Joseph Smith had translated the Book of Mormon. Excitedly, they found their way back. where he told them that he didn't so much have the plates, but he was the plates. You know, like how the Catholics believe Mary became the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh.
So one of the archangels fucking had it, left on the spot, never turned back. Like, that's enough of that. So all this time, while his main dudes were sleeping on the street, Emmanuel, his wife, and now 7 children were living in hotel suites year-round. He would spend a few months paying for the rooms in cash every morning to build trust with the hotel. Then after a while, he'd stop paying. So by the time they would get evicted, weeks later, he'd owe thousands, and he'd just skip town. This was before, like, credit cards were a big thing, right?
Sure.
So it turns out his tiny band of followers were committing every stripe of fraud to support their ever more rotund God and his huge family. They were cashing bad checks, committing wire fraud, asking relatives for money for imaginary illnesses, all in addition to working themselves half to death and giving Emmanuel every cent.
Right.
So Emmanuel bragged to his estranged family that he was going to put them all up in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York and take them on $1 million shopping sprees.
Oh, well, I mean, that's nice.
That's thoughtful, isn't it? Yeah, he'd call his mother and just go, and who really had not a lot of contact with him anymore, and just ramble on about all his money. He was a regular fixture at a local Rolls-Royce dealership, where he would fondle the cars and promise to return directly with a check. In an odd personal twist, a local French restaurant owner, who I knew personally, got so accustomed to Emmanuel's extravagant daily takeout orders that he began inventing more and more elaborate desserts for him out of gratitude.
Wow. Those are fraud desserts. That's what those are.
They were fraud desserts, probably all bad checks. So he pestered his old mission companion, Skip Danes, who at this point was the owner of a music store, to order him 2 of the most expensive pianos available. When Skip said the best he could find cost $47,000 apiece, Emmanuel thought that was too cheap for his tastes.
His only income was fraud at this point, basically.
It was all fraud, and his followers working whatever jobs they had and just giving him the money. So he was living large, but he could only skip so many towns and cash so many bad checks. His 2 remaining archangels got picked up by the FBI for their frauds. In a panic, Emmanuel returned to his friend's music store and begged to borrow his pickup truck immediately. He drove it to Immigration Canyon, just on the edge of Salt Lake City, ran a hose from the exhaust pipe through the wing window, and killed himself via asphyxiation.
Oh, wow.
Jesus.
Yeah. The creator of the universe, Almighty God, and Jesus Christ in one body, and the Holy
In
Ghost,
the Book of Mormon.
had $5 in cash in his pocket and left no note.
Wow.
So when his wife, Rachel David, she'd changed her name, found out, she panicked. She had no clue this was coming. They were, like I said, they were absolutely broke. She was, in addition to being the wife and mother of his 7 children, she was an absolute devotee to his messianic cult of personality.
Well, you got to be.
You're going to believe or leave,
Yeah.
lady. So she apparently couldn't deal with being apart from her living God. So this is where it's going to get really graphic. So anybody who wants to leave, this is the time to do it, because there's going to be a graphic description of children being killed. So,
Oh, goody.
yeah. Our friend Keith might remember when he came out here for our meetup last October, he stayed on the 11th floor of what's now the Holiday Inn in downtown Salt Lake City. But in August,
I think it's creepy that you know what floor he was on.
he told me. He gave me a
Yeah.
matchbook with his room number on it. I don't know what that was about.
Well, that's interesting.
But in August of 1978, it was the International Dunes Hotel. We suspected Keith's north-facing room might have been the David's family suite. As morning commuters were walking to work along 2nd South and West Temple on that sunny summer morning, they heard screams. A boy was falling from the 11th story balcony. Then a girl climbed over the rail of what seemed to be her own volition and fell, bouncing off the coffee shop roof and onto the sidewalk.
Jesus.
Then another. A woman was struggling on the balcony with a 4th child who didn't want to jump. The people on the street were screaming for her to stop. Stunned hotel employees raced to the elevator to try to get up to stop this horror. The 4th and 5th child lost their struggles with their mother and were tossed over the railing. So did the 6th. The assembled crowd on the sidewalk were screaming hysterically. Rachel fought the last child, who shared her name, Rachel, over the balcony, then jumped herself before employees could get to the door. An odd little fact, the hotel famously had an exterior glass elevator on the north side, so it's entirely possible the hotel manager was watching bodies fall past him as he tried to get to the top floor.
Oh.
3 of the children somehow survived the fall and were rushed to the hospital. 2 soon died. The third, Rachel, is believed to have survived because she struck her siblings' bodies when she hit.
Oh, my God.
She spent months in the hospital, then was released to a foster home, obviously because now she's an orphan.
Oh, my God.
So none of these kids were on the grid. It seems as far as the state of Utah was concerned, they didn't even exist.
Wow.
They never attended formal school, no record of vaccinations, nothing.
Wow.
Hotel employees said they never used the pool or the playgrounds. They basically never heard them speak.
Oh, my God.
Now, I know there are a few serious and good homeschoolers out there, but the thing about public school, if nothing else, is somebody somewhere is paying attention.
Right.
Right? Maybe they can notice when something's wrong and certainly know when you go missing. I don't know if that could have prevented this or helped these kids, but they definitely deserve better from society, and society failed. Their names were Elizabeth, 14, Joshua, 9, Deborah, 7, Joseph, 8, David, 7, and Rebecca, 6.
Jesus.
Anyway.
And Rebecca was the only survivor?
Rachel.
Rachel
Was the only survivor. Mother's dead, father's dead, 6 siblings dead.
Wow.
Anyway, somehow the now severely handicapped Rachel ended up with her uncle in Colorado, who was still a believer in the cult.
No!
Yet another egregious failure by fucking society.
How?
I don't
what?
know. I tried to find out how that happened. So struggling mentally and confined to a wheelchair, he declared that she is the reincarnation of Eve.
Of course he did.
And they would together await the return of her father god to rule the earth. So I read an article about her living with her crazy uncle like 10 years back, the Eve thing and the expected return of her father, and I freaked that her uncle might see her as the gateway for that return. And I know that's a nasty thing to presume about somebody, but it's high time to stop giving fuckers like this the benefit of the doubt. So the latest I could find on Rachel David is that she's no longer in her uncle's care, but is in an assisted living center near Denver. So hopefully that bodes positively for her at this stage in her life. A few believers, a dozen at most, still exist. They scoff at the idea they're capable of more violence like this, but still somehow insist there was nothing wrong with what happened on that August morning.
Wow.
So that's the family of David, guys, or what's left of them. And hard to squeeze a lot of laughs out of that turnip, but that's the problem when you do a comedy show about cults.
Hey-oh.
You know?
Hey, Cody, just add in a whole lot of really awful
Clown horns.
sound effects.
And fart noises. And yeah.
Don't do that.
Well, that is pretty dreadful. I remember that when we were kids, it was such a big deal.
Yeah, we lived not super far from downtown where we grew up, but we didn't go to downtown very often.
No.
I don't know why that was. I think maybe we were worried there were homosexuals down there or something. But for some reason we had
Turns
business.
out they were inside the house.
For some reason we had a business downtown that day, and I remember driving on West Temple and seeing the whole fire trucks everywhere.
Oh, that day.
That day, yeah.
The only thing that was more concerning was our mother had a healthy fascination with that story. She talked about it all the
I don't
time.
know if it was healthy.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so there you go. That's
Wow.
the family of David. So good times.
But yeah, boy, just when you hear about a cult starting, just know that nothing can go wrong in that scenario.
And it was shockingly remains Utah's biggest murder-suicide today.
So far.
Yeah. Knock, knock, knock. Have a nice day, everybody.
All right, hooray, moving on.
Well, Uncle Dan,
What? Yes, hello.
there's one thing that is hot on the minds of all of our friends and listeners out there.
Yeah, that's true.
That we don't cover often enough. And you know what that is?
Those Marshmallow Circus peanuts.
Marshmallow Circus Peanuts is second, actually. in the
Oh,
poll.
shit, okay.
First is hydrology and subjects related to hydrology and the management of water.
Yeah, water management's a big deal.
Yeah, so sorry we've been remiss, guys. Uncle Doug's here with the weekly hydrology report.
You give the people what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I thought, we often on the show we dive into specific stories in various scriptures and kind of pull them apart.
We do.
So, given the hydrology theme, I thought we could dig into the parting of the Red Sea and talk about that for a little while.
The fact of the parting of the Red Sea.
Of course.
Hang on. Spoiler alert. Did you just give away the game right at the beginning? God.
Sorry, but spoiler alert, trigger alert.
Should we start over?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. It happened.
It happened.
Charlton Heston, part of the Red Sea.
There was a very clear thing
Then he became the head of the NRA. Then he died.
Yep.
You can have my Red Sea when you pry it from my cold, dead
Wet hands.
So let's dive in. So we are, of course, in the book of Exodus, chapter 14. And just to bring everyone up to speed on what's happened so far, after 430 years of slavery, Moses has managed to free the Jews after God inflicted 10 plagues on the Egyptians, including turning the Nile to blood, myriad pestilences, flaming hail, and then finally killing the firstborn male offspring of not only all the Egyptians, but all the animals.
Wait, he killed the animals?
He killed the firstborn of all the animals.
Just to be.
I didn't know that.
Just to be a shit.
That's a dick move right there.
You're just being a shit.
The kids I can handle, okay?
Right? That much makes sense. All that makes sense.
Yeah.
But by the way, the flaming, the hail that burns as fire upon the
Yeah.
ground, that's some pimp ass shit right
That's
there.
pretty cool.
I
Yeah.
was liking that one.
I know, and it's like frogs and fly,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it's like, okay, fine, flaming hail.
Right.
Open with flaming hail.
Yeah,
just my advice.
that's the only one you need.
That's right.
And I like it.
You start with flies, you're just annoying everybody.
It's just taking credit for the weather.
Yeah, I like that Pharaoh at some point at like Pestilence 7 is like, yeah, still not convinced.
Yeah,
Pestilence 8,
exactly.
yeah, I don't know. It could just be happening.
That's right. So finally, the Pharaoh, who's popularly thought to be Ramses II, because the supposed timelines jive, and because if you're going to choose a Pharaoh to be the villain of your story, go big.
Sure.
Yeah.
Finally, he'd had enough, and he allowed the Jews to leave. And again, none of this is recorded in the Egyptian history. Not the 430 years of Israelite slavery,
Right.
the plagues, or the death of the firstborn.
There's literally no evidence that even the slavery happened.
Exactly.
Like the base point from which this story arises.
The grand monuments of Egypt were not built by slaves. We know that. They were built by seasonal workers.
So
Mexicans then.
That's right.
That's right. Build the wall.
Built the pyramid.
It's just as effective. So to guide them through the wilderness, God sent a pillar of cloud in the daytime and a pillar of fire at night that led the Israelites on their way.
Oh, that's fun.
So all this is to say, if there was ever a group of people that had proof positive of God's existence, it was the Israelites at this time and place.
Which is why we know for a fact that they didn't just immediately turn away from that God the second they had a chance to.
Oh, spoiler alert.
What?
They turn against God and Moses nearly every other verse.
It is shocking.
It doesn't matter what they see. Next verse, like, Moses, what the hell?
The second the tablets of the Ten Commandments were half an inch out of frame, they were building another idol. Like they were still in the room, they were just behind a bookshelf, and they said, "Well, let's build an idol."
They didn't destroy the golden calf; they just kind of covered it up.
Right.
So they doubt Moses so much that the writers of the 1956 film that hopefully we've all seen, The Ten Commandments, had to invent a character, Dathan, played by Edward G. Robinson, to embody this constant doubting. So basically, they couldn't weave it into the story. They had to invent a character that was this kind of petulant, doubting Thomas.
Right.
And
Doubting Dathan, thank you.
Doubting Dathan. And by the way, if you go look at the IMDb page for Edward G. Robinson, it's pretty amazing. Between 1916 and 1973, he was in like 6 to 10 movies a year.
Yeah.
It's bananas.
Well, that's how the system used to be. Like the studios basically
the old studio system.
they
was
owned people. And they would march you from your Bible movie in Studio A.
Yeah.
By the time you got to Studio B, you're wearing a gangster suit, holding a Tommy gun, right?
It's amazing that they didn't have like continuity errors where like we're in a 20s gangster movie, somebody wanders in a cowboy hat
or a space suit.
Right.
So do you know what Edward G. Robinson's last film was?
No.
Soylent Green.
Oh, and then he was processed.
That's right.
because it's people.
That movie was made of people.
And again,
Spoiler alert.
we're doing 6 degrees of Charlton Heston, right?
Yo, totally. So, and if any listeners have not seen the Cecil B. DeMille, The 10 Commandments, stop listening right now and go watch that movie.
It only takes 10 hours.
It only takes 10 hours.
It's a pretty amazing movie, actually.
It's amazing. It's not only for the overacting and scene chewing, but the set design is, because there's no CGI.
Right.
All those sets they built, they're unbelievable.
Yeah, and the special effects were all these really primitive compositing.
But still look kind of cool.
And the special effect in question, the parting of the Red Sea, was kind of mind-blowing to movie audiences.
Oh,
And
yeah.
wasn't it a series of oil paintings that they kind of cartoonized?
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
it was an animated oil painting.
I do love. I will say that about that movie. Some of my very first crushes on women
Oh, yeah.
were Egyptian women throwing roses out and yelling Moses,
Yeah.
Moses.
Just not
Oh,
wearing,
yeah.
clearly not wearing bras.
Wearing-
we were allowed to watch that as kids.
Wearing those, just loosely draped in chiffon.
Dan's getting
gossamer dresses.
far away. And by the way, if you can't stand all 10 hours of that movie, there is an amazing little mashup somebody made on YouTube called 10 Things I Hate About Commandments, I think.
That's right.
Where they recut the 10 Commandments like it's a high school,
Like a trailer for a rom-com.
like a trailer for a rom-com. It's fucking hilarious. Whoever that is, you're a genius. I love you.
And then, Yul Brynner's Ramses II is worth the watch alone.
Yeah.
Moses. Elliot. I'm not going to do it.
Moses.
On a quick side note, I was visiting Uncle Mark in California one time when they were filming a movie outside of the Mann Chinese Theater, right on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah.
So there's all the stars, and then right in front of the Mann Theater, there's all the impressions of the hands of the movie stars.
Right.
And I just noticed I was standing right next to Charlton Heston's handprints. So, of course, I put my hands in his, and they fit so perfectly, I thought something was going to happen. The stone tablet was going to slide down or something.
And it just goes right into the NRA boardroom where they're all assembled around the table.
And I'm kinged.
Yes. At last.
Unfortunately, it didn't
I don't
happen.
know if that's something to be proud of or not. And
I don't know
also,
what to make of it.
like, that's how you got that herpes. Let's be very clear.
That's
Don't
fine. That's fine with me if you believe that.
don't put your hands where everyone has put their hands. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so let's pick up the narrative in chapter 13, and in the spirit of my new biblical experimentation, this is from the New International Version. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
you've gone mad.
I'm doing it.
The NIV.
Doug's gone electric.
All right, verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the road to the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle.
Okay, hold on.
So,
Okay.
So God thought that if they saw some armed conflict,
yeah,
they might decide to go back to slavery.
they
You
were
know what? Slavery's better than this.
exactly.
Right.
That is exactly what he thought.
Okay, so basically, God has as much faith in the Israelites as they have in him. I don't see this relationship working out.
That's exactly right.
You guys should see other people. God, you should choose other people.
So yeah, and there's so a couple things here. First, God's a major dick. He makes them walk further than they would need to walk.
Well, that's established.
yeah.
Yes.
And second, although it says the Red Sea, many scholars think that this is a mistranslation of the Hebrew Yam Suf, and should actually be Sea of Reeds or Sea of Seaweed. So,
What?
does it matter if what is to follow takes place on the Rift Sea that separates the Arabian Peninsula from the continent of Africa, that's up to 220 miles wide, or some brackish wetland? I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah. It's funny because I just pulled up a Google map of the Red Sea, of the area, and if we were to assume that these Hebrew slaves started out in or around Cairo area / Alexandria area,
Right.
and they're headed toward Jerusalem / Israel or whatever,
Easterly.
Yeah.
there is no Red Sea between those
Right.
places.
But you know what is in between them is the Nile River Delta.
Sure.
And so,
Which is probably muddy.
brackish, nasty, reedy, swampland.
Yeah.
So, take it or leave it. So, now they go to chapter 14 where the Israelites have camped at, I know you guys know this, Pi Hahiroth. Come on, we went to school together.
Oh, fuck.
Between
it was on the
Migdal-
tip of my tongue.
Between Migdal and Balzaphon.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Well, there's a KOA there. Right. And that's a guarantee of quality.
I've played Balls of Fun. It's fun with other boys. Never mind. Go on.
Go on.
Okay, so at this point, they've escaped Egypt, and the Pharaoh has come to terms with this. So God hardens Pharaoh's heart and mentally makes him decide to chase after the Israelites and slaughter them.
Wait, God makes Pharaoh chase them?
God changes Pharaoh's mind. It's like, they're out. They've made it. Pharaoh's okay with it. Okay.
Why does he change their mind?
He
just engineered these fucking 10 plagues to get them out of there.
You know what? The story got boring.
God says he wants to destroy the Egyptian army to show everyone that he's the man.
Oh, okay.
So he's got to.
So he can't just zap them all.
No.
They've got to be pursuing or
he's
doing.
He's got to ramp up the drama.
He's setting them up to fail. I get it. Okay.
All right. So off they go with 600 chariots to murder all the Jews. The Jews see them coming and instantly turn on Moses. So chapter 14, verse 11. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve in Egypt than to die in the desert." Where's your God now, Moses?
Boy, these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. All he's done is lit our way through the night with pillars of fire.
Plagues and firstborn deaths and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this Moses has been calling in airstrikes and just destroying Egypt, and you're like, wow, suddenly I got no faith in this guy.
What have you done for me this afternoon?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." I don't want to do it. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again.
That is the worst Heston I've ever heard in my life.
It's kind of a Walken Heston.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then, okay, here it comes. This is the heat of the meat. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east winds and turned it into dry land.
Oh, it took all night?
It took all night. It was windy.
He couldn't just do it instantly.
No.
This is where DeMille lied to us.
A bit, right? It doesn't have the same oomph.
A bit.
Yeah, when Moses stretched out his arms.
Okay, so the easterly wind.
Yeah.
So they were headed east.
Yeah, I guess
right?
so.
Is
Yeah.
Is that what the map
Yes,
says?
yeah.
And a wind from the east.
So the wind was at their backs, I suppose. And it blew all night.
Oh, yeah. Easterly would mean it's blowing toward the east?
Toward the east. So, okay. So the tide went out.
Basically.
Or
all night long.
Yeah.
And okay.
But let's remember one thing. The tide goes out every 6 hours, right? So it takes longer for the Red Sea to part from the easterly wind than it does for the tide to go
12
out.
hours.
No, it's
6. That's right.
6.
It goes out.
Out and in.
Yeah.
Never a
Twice.
miscommunication.
Out and in twice a day.
Never a miscommunication. So how fast were the chariots going?
I don't know. I know, right?
Also,
yeah.
Well, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, the chariots were stopped by a pillar of fire. So
Right.
God stopped them
Okay.
and held them at bay while he drained the sea overnight.
Right.
He could have maybe burned them up with the pillar of fire. I don't know.
The pillar of fire wasn't enough for Pharaoh to be like, you know what, fuck it.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. I think you mean he drained, because we were talking about this. It's marshland, right?
He drained the swamp.
Drained the swamp.
That's right.
Drain the swamp.
Drain
Pillar of
the
fire. Pillar of smoke.
I knew I'd heard that before. So we get to verse 24, and to your point, Mark, God says, well, here's the scripture, 24. "During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariot so they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, quote, 'Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt.'" Obviously.
Well,
Right.
that's
Right?
Well, but then
that's the logical conclusion, yes.
What game is God playing here? Because the Jews are standing by waiting for the tide to go out, and they got a nice breeze, and then there's a pillar of fire, and then these confused Egyptians, and God dispatched to chase down the Jews so he could kill them, but now he's like, well, I'll tangle up their wheels.
I know. So that's where we are.
Typically in screenwriting or literature, you say, what is a character's motivation?
Right. And what can we...
What the fuck is he doing?
What's he doing? And, if you can pull something out of the story and it doesn't change the story, pull it out.
Yeah.
Which is basically most of the Bible.
Right.
Okay. So, of course, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he commands his chariots to charge, which they do. And then the waters come crashing back in, killing all of the Egyptians, their chariots, their horses, and the Pharaoh himself, as we'll learn in chapter 15.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So according to this account, the most powerful pharaoh in Egyptian history, one of the most well-known rulers in history at all, it turns out died in an event that was never recorded, chasing a group of people that were never recorded by the most record-keeping people in history. So there it is.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, Pharaoh II died in the...
Ramses II.
Ramses II, sorry.
Yeah, didn't Ramses... Didn't they discover Ramses II's body?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he's Tutankhamun.
Yeah. No, he's not.
No, he's not Tutankhamun. He's his own guy.
Ramses II.
But he did.
But
he
they
did
had
go
something
on
in common.
Yeah, he did go on a tour.
What did they have in common?
Teuton.
Oh my God!
They had Tutankhamun.
Oh, fuck.
Wow. Okay.
And scene.
Don't
Okay.
worry. Don't worry, everybody. We don't pay Doug. Don't worry.
All right, so chapter 15, by the way, is one long, painful song of praise to the murderous and manipulative Lord that the Israelites will turn on in verse 2 of the next chapter.
It's amazing. It's funny. I did long ago. I had a blog, and I did a blog post about this story.
Yeah.
And one of the funny things that you wisely chose to skip over because it's not pertinent to the Red Sea itself, to the parting of the sea, is that I had remembered that they made a golden calf when they got to the Promised Land or whatever.
Yeah.
Or when they got to the
Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. The fuck did they get gold? And so I had to go back and a couple chapters earlier, when the Exodus is starting, God commanded them to go to all of their slave owners
And take their gold.
and borrow their gold.
That's right.
And what's amazing is we're meant to believe that the slaves went to their masters and said, "Can I borrow your gold?" And the masters were like,
You're going to bring it back, right?
"Yeah, that's cool."
Why does one borrow gold?
At what point does that? Yeah, and also, if you know for a fact that
Doug
you
is
have no intention of returning something,
Yeah.
that's not borrowing.
Doug has occasionally borrowed my chop saw, but I just need to borrow this gold to change a tire.
No one's ever borrowed gold in all of history. You take gold.
Yeah,
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so we all know the slavery, the Jewish slavery in Egypt was not a historical fact. It didn't happen. But you're leaving, personally depriving your master of his property, which is your body and your labor, and taking his money. And he's like,
look, if this were a true story, and you were and you were actually a slave and had been your whole life, fucking take your master's gold.
Sure.
I'm fine with that.
oh, I'm not questioning the morality of it. I'm just questioning the fucking master's judgment.
But it's clearly never happened. That's the point.
All right. Well, if you're a slave, fucking take everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
take the gold out of his mouth.
Most likely none of this happened. However, as we all know, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, of which Exodus is number 2. These were compiled from several different sources.
It's a steaming number 2 is
That's
what it
right,
is.
it is. In this story, we see at least 3 or possibly 4 sources from which the writers of Exodus took this story. In the oldest, God blows the sea back with a strong east wind. Number 2 is Moses stretching his hand out over the water. In the third, God clogs the chariot wheels of the Egyptians. In this version, the Egyptians don't even enter the water. And fourth is the song in the next chapter called the Song of the Sea, where God casts the Egyptians into Tehemat, or the abyss. So was it a particularly high tide? Was it chariot wheels getting clogged by reeds? Or just straight up bullshit? As with all these clearly metaphorical stories, much backfill has been attempted by people that ought to know better. People have pointed to tidal bores and storm surges to argue that, hey, it could have happened.
Yeah, freak waves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever.
One of the accounts that we've talked about when we talked about the 10 plagues was that there was a volcanic eruption that caused all of this. And then this same version says that caused the Red Sea to recede like Yellowstone Lake is doing because of volcanic forces.
Right.
So, anyway.
Right. So all those natural phenomenon,
Yeah.
10 in a row.
Exactly.
There was a big swarm of flies. The river turned red. The thing and the thing and the thing. And it all broke the Jews' way.
Right. Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
if we know anything about the Jews, it's they are lucky.
Would it surprise you to know that 3 other Israelites parted the Jordan River in similar fashion to Moses?
That's right. Joseph did with
Joshua.
the ark. Joshua with the ark. Right.
Yep. Joshua stopped the flow of the river Jordan, causing a big mountain of water to form upstream so the priest could carry the ark across.
That's right. I remember that.
And then Elijah parted the Jordan River by...
You know what happened?
What?
When they caused that huge flood upstream, Noah built his ark up there. There was almost like an ark fucking thing going
He
on.
just sailed by.
Yeah. Took their ark the fuck out. Ark on ark violence, man. Nobody ever talks about it.
So Elijah parted the Jordan River by slapping it with his robe. And,
Like Benny Hinn.
and then Elisha parted the Jordan River by slapping it with Elijah's robe.
Well, when you got a trick that works, go with it.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
a good robe. I want that robe.
That's the plot from
I have
Prestige.
I have been caught on the wrong side of a river a time or two. It'd be nice to have a robe
Yeah.
that you could just...
Yeah.
Always carry a robe.
Always carry a robe or an ark.
That particular robes, especially.
So there it is. There's the parting of the Red Sea.
Wow, I'm convinced.
Yeah, suddenly I'm a Christian again. Hooray!
You laid out all the evidence, and I think it's unassailable.
Yeah.
Right? So, wow.
Let's get out of here.
With that,
times.
let's move on.
Let's move on. Hosanna!
Oh,
And praise to us.
Hallelujah!
Yes, indeed.
We have concluded our fundraiser
praise
Yes.
be. Praise be.
for the a little while ago anyway for the FFRF, and Uncle Dan has some wonderful news to share about your generosity.
Yes, indeed. So we've tallied the amount that we owe to the FFRF. Because what we did was for those who don't remember, we basically 20% of everything that we earned in December from our patrons was going to go to the FFRF, and then also
Which is the Freedom from Religion Foundation, just in case.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes. So yes, we donate, and then we said anybody who started in December, we would give a full month's worth of their donation.
That's right.
As well. What we've decided to do is, and then also, we need to mention that our beloved editor Cody, sweet man that he is, decided that he was going to donate his entire December's
Editing fee.
editing fee
Yeah.
also to the FFR.
And it's hard to tabulate the cost of a single lump of coal, but we did it.
we sorted it out. Basically, if you carry the two, it works out just fine. So our total that we are giving to the FFRF, there's no drum roll, but that's okay, is $625.
$625, everybody.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
So that they will be receiving that shortly. But we just wanted to reach out to all of y'all, everyone that donated, and say thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. That's really, really a good cause.
For helping us give to them. Yeah.
In a tough month when money's tight and we've got to face our families, et cetera, and we've got to spend that money on booze.
And the costs of the war on Christmas.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. So thanks for stepping up.
Yeah.
And the FFRF, we've spoken to them. They're very, this is something that they need now more than ever.
I believe their direct quote was, "Thank God."
Indeed. They literally, like, this couldn't come at a better time. Our Constitution hangs by a thread.
That's right.
It does.
So
get in there, Mitt. Save it.
Jump on Sassy and save the day.
Meanwhile, we had some other folks give to us this a week, so we've got some new patrons to thank, and I'd like to do so now. Thanks so much go to Sean, to Ben, Robert, and Chris. And now,
Thanks, guys.
we also owe some saints, because if you give at a certain level, you get your own personalized saint.
On the spot, made up.
Made up, yes, with no work put into it whatsoever. And so, right now...
Could be the tagline for our show.
Shush your much. So now, Doug, I'm going to need you to give a saint to Bob Tatohead.
Bob Tatohead.
Tatohead.
Great handle. Bob, your saint is Saint Victor of Hidalgo County. He is the patron saint of ineffectual border slats, lucha libre mask makers, and soft tacos. So congratulations
Wow.
Nice.
I love that saint.
Great. And I need to give a saint to D. That is the letter D. And this saint is Saint Brenda of 90210. And Saint Brenda is the patron saint of, oh my God, look at her. What is she wearing?
Yep.
Also of peach pits and of fad facial hair.
Yeah. Her martyrdom was horrendous.
It was very tough.
It was horrendous. And we'll talk about that another time.
She was canceled.
Because I feel like we've had enough sad on the show today.
She showed up in Sharknado 9.
Yeah.
So there you are, everyone. Thank you all so much for your patronage. If you'd like to be a patron of our show and have us talk about you, you can go to howtoheretic.com and click on the patron button, and that'll get you right there.
Or you can give us a 5-star review. Any place there's a button to push to do that. So please do. It helps out. Spread the word for the show. So let's keep it safe. Let's keep it real. Remember who you are. Well, Uncle Doug.
Uncle Mark.
Uncle Dan has some kind of bee in his fucking bonnet.
Again?
Yeah. He's got a problem with bonnets and bees.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. It seems to be, it's catching, I think.
He confuses his pioneer lady outfit for his beekeeper outfit, and it always leads to hijinks.
I just feel like I always forget if the bees are supposed to be outside or inside the clothing.
Yeah.
It's just a thing about me.
It's like a USB port. You always do it wrong the first time.
Yeah.
So what's the bee in your bonnet today, old friend?
Here's the thing. I wanted to talk about, Uncle Mark, you were recently on, you betrayed us and did a guest spot on another show.
I did. I've been seeing other shows.
We're not worried.
What was the show?
The Truth Wanted with a very nice young man who goes by Objectively Dan.
Right. So
he works out of the out of Dillahunty's outfit down to Austin.
Right. And not to be confused at all, by the way, with Uncle Dan.
With unobjectively Dan.
Unobjectively Uncle Dan.
Yes.
Anywho, here's the thing. One of the things that you guys talked about, you had a caller in.
Yes.
Who? Will you just sort of introduce what
Sure.
happened there?
Yeah. So you can look at this on I believe it's Truth Wanted's YouTube channel. But it's a call-in show, and these guys are kind of in the street epistemology business, right?
Sure.
And
everybody who's listening knows what that word means.
right. So they basically just have this Socratic method of talking to people about their beliefs and asking a lot of questions, being very respectful about it.
Right.
Even when true loonies call in. So anyway, a guy called in. He wasn't a true loony. He was an atheist. He was just an older guy.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't religious, but he was expressing difficulty with pronouns. He did not like the idea that the world is changing in that particular way and was really struggling. And he was being very sincere.
The kids these days, here's the thing. The kids these days, some of them don't accept the gender that was assigned to them at their birth.
Yeah.
And they go off on their own in their own ways.
A bunch of queers.
Well,
Goddamn.
it's kids these days can express the fact that they don't accept the gender they were born with.
Right. So we had quite a lengthy conversation with this guy. And, he admitted at the end that he had a lot to think about. So that was helpful.
Yeah. So what I thought we'd talk about today is the fact that everybody, including our listeners, is going to encounter someone who is difficult to accept. In this world of confusion and misinformation and stuff, we're going to find people that we don't want to accept. Now, those listeners who are just recently out of religion or are considering leaving religion, they're going to suddenly be expected by people around them. They've grown up. They may have grown up in a world where they are expected by everyone around them not to accept
certain people,
people.
certain behaviors, etc.
Gay people or black people or
coffee drinkers,
whatever.
Loose women,
right? Exactly. Whatever is listed on the sign that is carried by the protester.
Steeplejacks, Gandhi dancers,
dogs and cats living together.
Yes.
Anyway, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about how to accept people and why to accept people, because I think that it's actually vitally important for us. And those are, and it's not just people who are just out of a religion that will have trouble accepting people. I know lots of dyed-in-the-wool atheists who have a real trouble even just having a friendship or a communication with a religious person.
Right. So that's yeah. Well, this atheist that called into the show, I don't know that he had a problem with religious people, but he was definitely struggling with this pronoun issue. I think in his case, he didn't admit to his age, but he told me I admitted I was 50. He said he was quite a few years older than me.
Right.
So obviously, generation plays a big role.
It can do, but here's the thing. Eventually, if we're lucky, we're all going to be the old guy.
Yes.
And there is going to be a bunch of shit going on that's going to be tricky. And I think the practice of acceptance is something that we should all be working on always.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I want to start by saying that accepting other people does not mean that you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that you have to approve of them. It doesn't mean you have to give up any of your own rights or opinions, or not, and you don't have to pretend like their opinions don't impact you. None of that is what we're talking about here. You don't have to pretend to like them or whatever. But here's the thing. One of the things that we need to realize as skeptical people who try to keep informed is that every human being comes to who they are not by their own careful machinations and working themselves until they are the person that they are, but rather through a series of events that often have nothing to do with them.
Right.
We all come to the place that we are because a universe of shit has led to that.
Because we have gone through a rock tumbler of nature and nurture.
Right.
And are the sum total of those experiences.
And some of us do a lot of work on ourselves and work very hard to become a better or a more informed person or whatever, and some people don't.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that even that fact, the fact that you're willing to work on yourself or the fact that you're not willing to work on yourself, is a function of a bunch of things that were out of your control. So a person may have been raised in a certain kind of household. They may have been subjected to whatever amounts of torment or whatever amounts
abuse.
In the case of our fine president, whatever amounts of just blatant giving everything to this person without ever having to deal with any problems.
Right.
And all of this leads a person to be who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear that, and that's, there is no single source or reason why we are what we are. But I do think that our choices are certainly part of that process too, and whatever percentage of that is. But all three of us chose to leave religion.
Sure.
And we were raised that way. There were pressures for us to stay that way. And I think all of our listeners can kind of look at their lives and decide, I was given a choice, and I made that choice. Whether my upbringing kind of pushed me in one direction or another, we still got to where we are also, by both factors, by our external and our internal, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, what we're talking about here is not just what the external influences are, but also how your own chemistry and brain responded to those things.
Right.
All of that is a big mishmash, and most of it we have zero control over.
Right.
And then there's things like mental illness and stuff.
Disability. All a million factors that contribute to the person that suddenly presents themselves standing in front of you one day.
Right. So I'm going to talk about one of those people, your Uncle Dan.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about me because I remember a time when I was not accepting. Let's just stick with the trans people thing.
Yes.
Because it's a great sticking point for a lot of people right now. At this moment in history, it's a tricky one right now.
Right.
And I remember a time when Uncle Dan, you'll all be shocked to learn, was not tremendously accepting of trans people.
I would say that's probably true of all of us.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't want to accept it. I made fun of the concept. I had a lot of funny jokes about, being a man trapped in a woman's body. What a funny thing. Or a woman trapped in a man's body or whatever. And that's where I was. I didn't want to accept it. I assumed mental illness.
Yeah.
And what's great about that moment, what's fantastic about that moment, me going, well, they're just mentally ill and being dismissive because of that, is that I was sitting there as a person who has been not neurotypical. I've had ADHD my whole life. I've had depression most of my life and an anxiety disorder most of my life. I'm mentally ill. So for me to look at another person and go like, I dismiss you because I assume that what you're experiencing is mental illness.
You're crazy.
You dumb, crazy person.
Right.
That's just me being a dick.
Yeah.
Right? But there are lots of good reasons why we're dicks about these sorts of things. But I think what it points out is that in order to accept other people, we actually have to reflect on ourselves. It forces us to do that.
Absolutely. And I think the same thing, Uncle Dan, when I was in religion, I was so judgmental of people who weren't. Gay people, transgender people was just such a subject that I didn't have any experience with.
Right.
It was so easy. And I think back on that kid that I was, and it makes me cringe. The fact that anybody could love me at all or still does, right, is just amazing to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm absolutely with you. Is that I think it kind of starts with the understanding that people should accept you, and you're not a peach.
Right.
Yeah, and I think so many of the fucking world's problems come down to a lack of empathy. And as a person, for whatever reason, this is how I came out of the rock tumbler. I was born into a house where being an incredibly sensitive, deeply empathetic person was not rewarded.
Right.
And so
that's why you weren't either of those things.
Yes, that's why you became the callous asshole that you are.
Yeah. So, but to watch people treat others with such a lack of empathy, which again is really just can basically be summed up as imagine yourself in their position.
Yeah.
Right. How can you not look at an immigrant, struggling to get across the border just so they can wash your fucking sheets, right? How can you not look at that person and feel something? Or a trans person, and this is what drove me crazy about this caller, is it's like when that person walks up to you for the first time and says, hello, this is my name.
Here are my pronouns.
Here are my pronouns. You decide that somehow you have the ability to negate a lifetime of experience and struggle and self-realization because it makes you uncomfortable. That's bananas to me.
Here's the problem. And I think I'm going to be able to challenge even you guys in just a minute.
Yeah.
We all have stories about people. Mm-hmm. And we have stories about how the world works. Mm-hmm. And as we get older, we become more and more sure that our story about how this universe works is correct.
Right.
Because you two are wrong.
Okay. Thank you for that. So when someone as me, as a straight white male, for whom straightness and whiteness and maleness has always worked great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys ought to try this.
That's a pretty good hand to draw.
It's awesome.
You guys should try it. It's fantastic. But it's hard to look at the world and go, maleness might not work for somebody.
Right.
Or straightness might not work for somebody. And go, well, it's worked so great for me.
Yes.
Everything, all the pieces fall into place when I'm straight and white and male.
How come it doesn't work for you?
Why can't you? So like there's a whole lot of shit going on in a person's brain, and it's a lot about the story of this other person. And I know, and you can, for you, Mark, it can be easy to look at an immigrant and say that person has struggled, that person is, or look at a refugee especially and say that person struggled in their own country, let's take them in and make them feel welcome and franchise them in our society.
Tear gas them and make them the enemies of an entire society.
But it's also easy if the story is told differently for someone to look at them and say, they're trying to hurt me and I'm trying and I need to we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we need to this is a process that's about challenging your own stories, and it's about challenging your own biases, because we're all biased in some way or another.
Sure.
So I want to invite our listeners to sort of look at their lives, find some people, because we can all think of them, but even people who are close to you, family members, friends, that sort of thing, who have something about them that you don't like. You know what I mean? People who do it. If your partner or your spouse doesn't clean the dishes the way you think they ought to, and you don't know why they don't. If your podcasting mate doesn't always have clean glasses for you when you think that he should.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about the elephant in the room.
I don't like being called an elephant, but that's okay. So like, and there are things that are that genuinely seem like real life foibles in people, problems that they should do this better. That person is a slob, and I hate going over to their house, and they should do better. Now, I want to be clear that I don't think that there's anything wrong with if you're open, if you're a kind, honest, open person, and you're able to, with generosity, exert some influence on someone to help them improve their own lives. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, and I also don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of tension. I have a friend who is chronically 5 minutes late for everything. And he's a dear friend, and I love him, but it drives me crazy. There's nothing I can do about it. So I live with it. I swallow it.
Well,
and it will expose itself in a murder-suicide soon enough. But you know what I mean?
There's a difference between a quirk or a you don't do dishes often. Or,
right.
That's all behavioral issues.
Yeah.
But something like race, gender, sex, how a person appears on... how a person has decided this is where they are on a spectrum because they've come to that. That's very different. Those are different things.
Yeah.
Those are immutable traits.
Right.
That are in a different category than, but they don't sweep off it.
Right. So, but part of what I want to get at is that even if someone behaves in an unacceptable way, you can accept that person. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean you have to love them, or you don't have to hang out with them all the time or whatever. But part of what I'm talking about is that people are facts. Mm. A person as they are is the fact of the matter. Mm-hmm. And we, as people who believe in acknowledging the world as it is, as skeptics, we need to start accepting people as facts and not try to make them into something that they're not for our own comfort.
Yeah, and I think the really good news about that, the easiest part is it doesn't cost anything. I can't remember if it was her mom or her dad, somebody saying, and you've all heard this, referring to black people, now they want to be called African American.
Right.
And it's like, well, whatever they want to be called these days. It's like, what?
Right.
What does it cost you?
It neither picks your pocket nor breaks your leg.
And if somebody wants to be referred to as her or them, what does it cost you to make that adjustment?
Well, I think there is a personal cost for a lot of these things. And that's why I don't want to downplay the personal cost, because there is an emotional and psychological cost. You have to self-confront about how you think the world works in order to say they when someone stands before you and you're used to gendering them. And I have felt that. I mean, the trans thing I had long accepted and I was fine with, and this person was assigned he at birth and has decided that she is a she, and I'm fine with that, and I'm down, and I'm an advocate, and I'm an ally. But when a young kid came up to me and said, they and them are my pronouns, I struggled.
Did you tense up?
I struggled. It was not easy for me. Because I am just so used to the binary. I'm so, like, if you're one or t'other, I get it. I'm there. I'm on board.
Right.
If you try to be a neither, I have a lot more thinking to do.
Right.
And I did have a lot more thinking to do.
And how'd it go?
Well, I think it's an ongoing process for me.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I'm to a place where I can accept a person, though. So if a person comes to me and says, I'm they and them, I will fuck up a number of times.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't know why I can't wrap my brain around it easy, but I can't.
Yeah.
But I fuck up and then I apologize and then I redouble my efforts.
But I think honestly, fumbling it must be acceptable.
Yeah. Every trans person that I personally know
Yeah.
is very willing. They're always willing to forgive an honest mistake.
I always mix up the gender of my cats.
He does.
I say he and she all incorrectly all the time.
He misgenders his
it's
cats.
like,
Do you dead name them too? That's not okay.
So I had a friend in college who his name was Tristan, and at some point, I don't know, junior year, he insisted on being called Tristan, and I refused, and I will refuse to this day.
Well,
wow, you guys are
there you
assholes.
go.
So
No, I'm just kidding.
But okay, so Dan, you're struggling with the they and them, and I respect that you're acknowledging that, and that's something that you're willing to tell the studio audience.
Yeah.
But there's a larger issue there about acceptance and tolerance and being, and I don't know if you're calling acceptance and tolerance kind of the same thing here, because I think they're a little different.
I'm not.
I think they're different,
I don't
yeah.
think that they're
But
the same.
people should understand that somebody's personhood and their humanity are not predicated on you understanding it.
Correct.
Right? So in your head, don't understand it all you want. But it's like I said to this caller on the show the other day, it's like, I don't like being told what I have to do. I don't like being asked to change my behaviors. And I said, well, anybody can ask you anything.
Right.
What you do is up to you. Like, the asking doesn't force an outcome.
Right.
So if a person comes up to you and says, my name is Rebecca, my pronoun is her and she, and you say, no, I feel like you're a Tim and you're a he.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're an asshole at that point.
Right. But
Right.
we do this all the time when friends get married and change their name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just accept it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. They get divorced, we change it back. It's fine.
It's true. When there are social moments where we're all just super okay with changing somebody's name.
Yeah.
We're super good with it. And if we can look for those moments, if we can look for these places where we were okay with it for X and we're not okay with it for Y, we start to understand that we're the dick. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're the asshole,
Yeah.
not them. And so I think that acceptance of other people and taking people at face value is a practice of sanity.
Yeah.
It is a way of saying, it is not a way of like accepting bad behavior. It is not, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to say, oh, because I accept you, your racism is okay. You don't have to say that at all.
Right.
But I know that you're a racist. That doesn't make you necessarily, holistically, a bad person or a person of no value.
Definitely not a person of no value. It is it definitely contributes to.
I don't want. I may not want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
And I will decry when you act in a bad way. And I will also work to influence you to become not racist. I will do that work.
Yeah, if I think there's a possibility that a conversation might, or several conversations might change a terrible behavior like that, I think people are worthwhile, and that's worth the effort. But for something in 2019 like being a racist, I think there are long odds. But
Right. Well, and be aware of the fact that anytime you endeavor to change another person in any way, you need to do some self-confrontation about your own judgmental your own
and
judgment.
what your motivation is to be doing this.
What from what part are you coming? Because if you're doing it because this person is an asshole and they need to change who they are and blah blah blah, you're probably not going to reach them.
Right.
So, like, if you haven't accepted this person as a person of value in the universe,
Yeah.
you're not going to reach them anyway. You might as well
Right.
just give up.
Well, and it doesn't help that we live in the most polarized time in our, at least our lifetimes. That it is, people have chosen sides, and the value of a person is kind of dictated by whether they fall on your side or the other side of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
So it's more important now than ever that we who have dedicated ourselves to having a pragmatic view of the world and the universe demonstrate that.
Well, and so I would challenge you all to look at people that you really don't want to accept. Someone like a kid in a MAGA hat smirking at an elderly native gentleman, and go and ask yourself, what could have led to this person being there? And also, just, he's a kid. Can we accept that people make mistakes and that he might become an awesome person later?
Well,
he's going to be on the Supreme Court at some point.
Well, yes, that's definitely going to happen.
This, not to get on this tangent because it's a big tangent, but looking at that kid, my initial reaction was rage and disgust and blah blah blah, and I still feel those things. But I also know that when I was a 16-year-old kid, I was a conservative Mormon community. Could I have been that kid? I can't say no.
Yeah,
it's when a kid is raised in Kentucky and he's sent to
all boys Catholic school
and all of these things, like, we don't. The fact is that you never know.
Yeah.
The factors that have led to a person to bad behavior or to something that you don't like about them, that doesn't nullify their humanity.
And what should have happened was the adult should have stepped in.
Yes.
Accepting him as a person, probably a fine kid, and said something about his fucking behavior.
You are way off track here, kid.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
are way outside of the lines.
You have value, but so does that man. And
right.
We are supposed to be empathetic and accepting of each other. I'm getting hot and bothered.
Yes.
But I don't know if you were going to go in this direction, Dan, but I think it's something that we've all observed in our community, our skeptical atheist community, for a long time, is there is a tendency to be incredibly black and white sometimes.
Yeah.
And to really...
And especially right now in this moment in history, everybody online wants to... You are either a good guy or you are a bad guy, and you are all the way on one side or the other of this thing. And I'm
completely calling the atheist skeptical community on the carpet, because we have a terrible reputation with misogyny. Mm-hmm. This is a white men's club.
Yeah.
We are not. This is even true in the gay community. We are shitty to trans people. We're shitty to bisexual people. But specifically as an atheist community, I think we have a lot of fucking work to do.
Yeah.
And it's tough because we don't have a pope, right? We are the cats that are proverbially hard to herd.
Yes.
And so it's really all we can do as individuals is kind of speak this truth.
Yeah.
And Dan and I have talked about in the future doing some kind of presentations on stuff like this to say, look, we have got to stop. We've got to do something about this reputation.
Yeah.
We have got to find a way to reach people that need what we have to offer and not make this a scary fucking community. Right. So
it's hard not to be smug and judgmental when you've gone through the journey that we as non-believers and all of our listeners have gone through. But it's incredibly important.
When you think you've found truth out of the muck and mire of falsehood, and you finally brushed off a little nugget of reality, and you're like, ha ha, all of these other people were telling me falsehoods, and I finally actually waded through the crap to find this thing. Yeah, we tend to be a little smug about it.
Right, and oftentimes the rocket fuel behind that journey of self-discovery is a lot of pain and a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Right, and it's so easy to exteriorize that, to externalize that, and take a shit on people. And there are people, there are people who deserve it. There are religious hucksters in the world doing harm.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you want to talk shit about Joel Osteen, I'm there. Right?
Sure.
But the average individual Mormon that we share our community with is
just a good person.
They're just folk.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we don't have the luxury of having some shit dogma to hide behind. So if we're mean to a trans person or unaccepting,
it's all on you.
That's you.
Yeah.
If we can't, if a Mormon, you meet a Mormon, and you say something really mean spirited about their religion to them, that's on you. We don't have the book to say, well, it's not me. God said this. No, that's you.
It always was you.
It always was you.
Right.
But we have nothing to hide behind.
The fig leaf has been removed.
We have a bigger responsibility to be better people. That's just the fact of the matter.
So I think the call here is to self-confront on these things, to be gentle with yourself about you, and then maybe you can be gentle with yourself about some people around you.
Right.
Tristan, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
I'm going
it's
to be okay with that.
Again, remember, somebody else's humanity does not hinge on you understanding it.
Right.
Right.
So if you can't understand it at the first meeting, take some time and try to do it. So by the second meeting, you're less likely to be an asshole.
Well, can I just say one quick thing? If somebody wants to be called something different, and you're not there yet inside of yourself, that doesn't mean you can't do that thing while you work on that.
That's
Yeah.
true.
You know what I mean? Like, you can just say, I don't quite get it. I'm not there yet. But you want to be called they, or you want to be called she.
Fake it till you make it,
Fake
baby.
it till you make it. It doesn't cost you anything.
If you don't want to be an asshole.
Yeah. Say, all right, I'm going to do this thing because you want it. You've asked for it. No problem. I will continue to work on it.
Yes.
Now, yeah, I just, we're going to get into trouble here. I get it.
Yeah.
We're all going to, I just want to remind everybody, you're all going to encounter things that are going to blow your mind. You're going to encounter someone who identifies as unicorn. And then what the fuck you do is up to you, and how you respond to it is up to you. But always remember that even if they claim that they're of a different species, that doesn't negate their humanity? Question mark? Wait, what?
Well,
What did I just say? I'm not sure.
When I was 4 years old,
Their
I-
unicornity.
when I was 4 years old, I identified as a ladybug. And
It's true.
Uncle Mark would not accept it.
Oh, Uncle Mark.
I think I was the most accepting of your ladybug transition.
You're a man bug.
Well, Maya Angelou, of course, said when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Right.
And I think that's a nice nice little coda to live by.
Right on.
There you go. All right. Well, with that said, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Well, friends, that is it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, howto@howtoheretic.com.
Or if your chariot is stuck behind a column of fire with a god on top of it, tell us about it in voicemail at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. I'm also on Twitter at HowToHeretic. Dan occasionally goes to Facebook and looks at it.
Yes. Hey, thanks so much once again to all of our lovely patrons. We're so proud of you.
And double thanks to our wonderful friend Cody Layton, not only for editing the show, but for contributing so generously to our fundraiser last
Indeed.
December.
Yeah.
Yes. And thank you to all of you for tuning in.
Bye, everybody.
Sayonara.